Hi, my name is Paula and I'm a new mom. Welcome to We've Probably Been There, a podcast by First Moms Club about how we really dealt and truly felt about everything motherhood. No BS, no judgment, and no advice, from us at least. Welcome to the club. So this is the story of great pain and coping with grief and guilt during and after losing a piece of ourselves, so after a miscarriage. Although I've never experienced this myself, I'm joined today by my two good friends, Alex, who is a mother of 3, and Vanessa, a mother of 2. Hi. So Alex, let's start with you. When did you find out you were first pregnant? Take us back to your story and, how were you feeling when you found out you were first pregnant?
Okay, so the miscarriage happened after I'd already had 2 children.
Okay.
How did I find out I was pregnant?
The normal way?
Well, I peed in a cup and then I put the stick in.
Okay.
And yeah, listen, I wanted a 3rd kid. It
Mm-hmm.
was always in my mind. It was always in my brain. I definitely was something I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And having had 2, I'm not going to say easy pregnancies because they had their own stuff, but having had 2 pregnancies where there was no loss, I was quite comfortable.
Okay.
I was telling people that I was pregnant right away.
Yeah.
Oh, you were?
Okay.
Yes.
Had you done that with your 2 others?
No.
You were probably emboldened by the 2 others.
Correct.
Like, I have had 2 successful pregnancies.
Yes.
Yes. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not even in my mind.
It wasn't really in my mind.
Okay. What happened next?
The first ultrasound.
How many weeks? Usually it's first, I forget, 9? No,
No,
12?
6.
6.
Like I did, what's it called? Oh. Yeah, it's like a viability.
Right.
A viability. So I did it at like 6 or 7 weeks. My husband, was he with me? Yes, he was with me. And they just said that the baby, or the embryo was a little bit small.
Okay.
But I didn't think anything of it because, again, I'd been through this already.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, we want you to come back like a week later. Okay, I'm going to preface all of this by saying this was February 2020. My sister was getting married in Miami March 7th, 2020. So the second, come back in a week was like a day before I was leaving for Miami. And I was like, I wanted to be able to go to Miami and feel
Okay.
Yeah,
everything's fine.
Everything's fine.
Yeah.
So I come back 3 weeks later. They're like, the embryo's still quite small, but you're okay. So we fly down to Miami on the Thursday. Rehearsal dinner is the Friday. Put on my fancy dress. My kids are all dressed up. We're at the rehearsal dinner, and I am spotting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's
But like heavily spotting, I'm gonna say.
So what are
If
you
you're
thinking?
bleeding, in that case?
What are you thinking? Are you thinking like
Panic.
Okay.
Panic because I am not in Canada.
Also.
Yeah.
I am and my sister is getting married the next day, and I am
Bleeding.
Yeah. So I go to bed. Next morning I wake up, I'm bleeding more.
Did you feel any pain?
I don't think so. Not that I remember at this point.
Okay.
And I call my doctor. Thankfully, my doctor was amazing, and they were like, listen, bleeding is somewhat normal. And as long as you don't see a huge increase in blood, you are okay, and we'll deal with you when you come.
Now, is miscarriage at all in your head at any time during this process?
100%.
Okay. And is that why you're panicking a little bit? Or are you thinking still it's not
a very
me?
high pressure situation?
Okay.
Right? I have my 3 kids. We're in a hotel room. I'm not in my own home with space.
Yeah.
I'm sharing a bath.
Yeah.
There's
you don't have time to think about
150 people of family, friends, whatever, and I am, you're performing.
Yeah.
Right? You're at an event.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
on. I'm a maid of honor at this wedding,
Right.
and all I can think about is
get through this day.
Get through this day.
Yeah.
I think, though, that even though you know that some amount of spotting can be normal in those first few minutes, when you do see that blood, I mean, more often than not, you can't help but think, something's gone sideways here.
Yeah.
you know?
Yes.
And like it's more probable if you see blood, I think, in your mind that you think like, oh, this is it. The pregnancy's not going to go forward.
Yes.
Then, oh, this is just normal spotting. Intuitively, it's like your mind goes to
that place.
And then you 100%. Just need that validation of knowing
100%.
what's going on.
100%.
But you had to get through this event.
I had to get through this
event. So what did you do?
It's not great. Basically, I went to go get my hair and makeup done at like the crack of dawn because that's the schedule of these things. And I had spoken already to my doctor. So now I'm like, okay, just have to maintain this level of bleeding. And hair and makeup is done. I go to the bathroom. I am bleeding a lot more.
Sorry, are you wearing tampons at this point or pads?
Okay. You are not allowed to wear a tampon.
When you're pregnant?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I also didn't, first of all, I was pregnant, so I didn't have anything.
Right.
Yeah. I think I made my husband run out to like
a store to get pads.
I did the same.
You control the situation.
You don't know that you're going to keep bleeding. Like it feels like it's going to stop.
Okay.
So I feel like at a certain point I wasn't wearing a pad because I was like, okay, it's done.
Okay. I see.
So I go to the bathroom. I am very much bleeding more. I call my doctor back from the bathroom because the hotel room where we're getting dressed is full of people. And he goes, listen, you got to go to the hospital.
Oh my God.
So I call, my mother-in-law was there, like my kids, we had a babysitter, whatever. We organize everyone. Justin and I get into a cab. We go to the hospital, the emergency room. This is COVID, like week 1 of COVID.
Oh my God.
So they're like taking your temperature and everyone's in masks, which is, I don't remember going to hospitals before and wearing a mask. So like, that was actually a little bit shocking.
Added pressure.
I am in full makeup and hair.
Full it's like Diana Ross is coming to the hospital.
Correct. And listen, they brought me right in. I started to cry and made a scene that I was going to miss my sister's wedding. And the nurses were wonderful. And they were like, we're going to get you through this.
Oh,
they were like, we're getting you to the wedding. Because that's all I could think about.
That is so stressful. I can't imagine.
I was like, I'm 3 hours away from this wedding starting.
Yeah.
So they do like a blood test and then they do an ultrasound and they see a heartbeat and they're like, oh, you're fine.
Moment of relief.
Huge relief. Moment of relief. Get dressed, get out the door, make it to the wedding. They fix my hair and makeup quickly.
But you're still bleeding.
But I imagine you're trying to reconcile the bleeding, and you know you're bleeding profusely.
But then I was like, I'm done.
And then you're like, but it's
heartbeat. Fine. But the heartbeat, there's a heartbeat and I'm fine. I don't talk about the heartbeat thing a lot, actually. And I go to the wedding. I put on this gown. I walk down the aisle, whatever. My kids are there. My big kids, they go to bed. And there's dancing. And I had asked the doctor when they were doing the ultrasound, like, am I good to dance? Am I good to walk? Like, and they were like, you're totally fine. Because I just had this vision of like, they're going to put me on like bed rest.
You're right.
So I'm going to be like on a chair at this wedding. And they were like, nope, you're good. There's a heartbeat. It all looks good. And let's say I get to 10 o'clock at night at the wedding and my sister, I don't know, she had to pee. I go and help her. She leaves the bathroom and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pee. I go to pee and I'm gushing.
Oh, God.
And I like find my husband and I'm like, we're ghosting. We got to get out of here. So we go back to our room. I put a pad on and I'm like.
You go to the hospital?
No.
You've just been there.
I know.
What do you do?
What do you do?
Right.
I think, anyways, basically the next morning I'm gushing blood again and we were there until like one day after and the doctor was like, listen, we're now at a place where it's like your health versus like losing a pregnancy.
Yeah.
So they're like, if you're okay, then come home. Like when you get home, we can figure it out. But if you continue to bleed too much, you need to go back to the hospital because it becomes your health. Like you're losing blood.
Yeah.
In any situation where you're losing blood, you need to be seen.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I made it to the plane. I got on the plane. I'm flying home. Like at this point, I am so shook. But I'm also still at this wedding. So I'm like seeing people, hi, how are you? But I'm dealing with this.
Yeah. Did you mention to any of the guest family members what you were going through?
My sister was very preoccupied.
For sure, it's her wedding.
My mother-in-law knew because she had to watch the kids when we went to the hospital. My mom, and I think that was it.
And so when you're on the plane and you're,
Yes.
you know, and like this is fully happening now, like
Yes.
you're gushing blood.
Yes.
Again, like
Numb.
there was a heartbeat. So are you still telling yourself?
No.
Okay, now it's like game over. Like something's really not wrong. Like
I think
something's
so.
wrong here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we got home. We literally brought my kids to my in-laws, and then we went to the hospital.
Okay.
And you pass at one point.
Yeah.
You pass like a bigger clot.
Uh-huh.
And I did that at the hospital, and I did like an ultrasound. Remember, it is COVID.
Yeah.
Like we got back and it was like everything shutting down.
Yeah. Oh
So the emergency room was awful, but they did the ultrasound and they said, listen, it looks good. Like
still?
No, it looks good as in like it's gone. Like you're empty.
Yeah.
Like you've passed it all. Because that's one of the concerns with miscarriages is that like you don't necessarily, your body doesn't always know how to expel it entirely.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you could need
A
help.
DNC, I think.
A DNC, yeah.
Yeah.
Or multiple DNCs. So
Which is what exactly?
a DNC is like, it's almost like they kind of like vacuum. it
Okay.
out. I don't know
Yeah.
if there's a more
Medical term.
a
I don't
nicer
know.
way of saying
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I
Okay.
think that's really
They help
really
take
just
it out.
exactly what it is.
They help
Yeah.
expel, and there's like medication you can take or that also helps. But and then I had already had an ultrasound booked for the next day, so they were like, go to that ultrasound and just triple check that it's all out of you.
Mm-hmm.
And
There was
that was
something
it.
heartbreaking though about having to go to the ultrasound, which was initially scheduled for just making sure the baby is okay.
Yes.
And now you're attending that ultrasound.
Yes.
For a whole different reason.
Yeah, and really just for the purposes of
Yes.
figuring out that you've expelled everything.
Yes.
So, yeah. So tell me, like, obviously you were heartbroken, but tell me, like, were you?
So I think I had to call. I had to call my boss and be like, I'm bleeding. I just had a miscarriage. I am not.
Was that
coming
easy
to
for you
work.
to say to her?
No.
Not easy. Easy's not the right word. Sorry. Like you.
To say it out loud?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
And to say it to somebody who, like, listen, I was good friends with my boss, but
Right.
this was not a person that I had shared that I was pregnant. This was not a person that I had shared that I was trying.
Right.
So, like, I had to talk about it. And someone that also had never been through it and didn't have kids.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? There's not that shared experience.
For sure.
So I took, like, a week and a half off, but by, like, 4 days into it, school's closed.
Yeah.
Everyone was in lockdown. So did I get to really process it? Absolutely not. For me, it was horribly traumatic. I think that the fact that it was at this big life event
Didn't make it
was
easier.
really hard.
Yeah.
Because you had to kind of shove it down. You had to. It wasn't the priority to feel
Yes.
that right now. It
Yes.
was the priority to get through the wedding.
Yes. And then we go into lockdown where it was like working
chaos.
full time, taking care of two
Yeah.
toddlers.
Yeah.
The world is ending.
Yeah.
So I feel like I was in a lot of pain, like emotionally.
Yeah.
And then, but like, whatever, I don't have time for this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think my kids went back to school in June of 2020. And I think it really hit me.
Okay.
I would say that I think about it all the time.
Really.
I would say that I didn't understand how it could be a loss, but it is a loss because it's, first of all, in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, it's a hope. There's like a hope, right? Like you have whatever, it's 9 weeks of hope, but it's still, you're imagining a life, a name, and I am not a person who is sentimental. I have dealt with major losses in my life and never felt like this. This was bigger.
Really.
Yeah. And I think about it all the time. I think about it every year. Again, my sister is it's my sister's anniversary, right? So every year on my sister's anniversary,
It brings up
I bring it back.
Oh my God.
That when the pictures were coming out of like the wedding, when
you remember
couldn't
what
look
you were
at the
going
dress
through.
again because I was literally bleeding in the dress. Like I didn't know what to do with the dress. It sat in my basement.
At what point did you start to feel that the emotions were kicking in? Because I imagine, during the wedding and then you're flying back, it's sort of just the adrenaline of what's happening to my body. Are you at that time already feeling those feelings of sadness, of loss? Or do those kick in? Like, when did those kick in for you? When did you start to feel unwell mentally about the miscarriage?
I imagine after I got home from the hospital.
Yeah.
Like the second time. Yeah, like after it all kind of, maybe after that second ultrasound, like when it was like certain, I just remember like being in the car and being like my husband being like, how are you? Like, what are you thinking? And I was like, I'm not talking.
And then how long did those feelings go on for?
A long time. A long time. I should say I had another child after.
Yeah.
I think.
When did your mind also, I wonder, like, go to, okay, I'm now ready to start trying again? Did that happen right away in order to like numb the pain of that miscarriage?
No.
Or?
It didn't happen right away. I'm trying to think of like the dates. I think I probably got pregnant like in the fall.
Okay.
So
like 6 months later?
Yeah. Okay. And like it's definitely was like an event. Yeah. And even in that second pregnancy, this is probably a whole other podcast in and of itself, is pregnancy after loss.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But like you're not the same. You're just not the same. No. I don't know how to explain it. You're just not the same.
And do you ever think, or did it ever cross your mind that, again, I've never lived that experience, so I don't know, so that's why I'm asking you questions.
Please.
But did you ever feel like, is it something I did? Like, did I do something wrong? Or like, was there any guilt towards yourself really deep down? Like, I know it's not your fault medically, but did you ever think for 1 second, like, it's my body, so something must have happened?
Like I was in control of it?
Yeah.
I will say I have an incredible OB.
Okay.
And I went to see her shortly thereafter, and she looked at me and she said, you know that there is nothing you could have done.
Okay.
Pregnancies work, pregnancies don't work, you are not in control. I think like at the beginning I probably thought like I shouldn't have danced. I shouldn't have done the hora. Yes.
Yeah.
But
that guilt didn't linger on is what I'm trying to ask.
I think her saying that really
helped you. Okay, good. Yeah. Amazing. The importance of good doctors.
I think one of the things that really haunted me was that heartbeat thing.
Yeah.
Like the fact that there was a heartbeat and then I went to a wedding and then it was, it made it feel,
of course,
like daunting almost. It's like,
Well, oftentimes also we're told if you hear that heartbeat,
you're safe.
Yeah. There's that sense of safety and security in the pregnancy that, it's likely that you feel it at least as though it's likely that it's going to go forward.
Yeah.
And so I could see how you would cling to that thought of the heartbeat and think, well, I'm good from now on.
Yeah.
And that makes the loss all the more difficult.
Yeah. And then you get pregnant again and you realize that the heartbeat isn't that same type of safety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. For sure.
Well, thanks for sharing your story, Alex. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I think mine will.
Well, you had a completely different experience. Yeah, I think so. Let's share us your story.
So mine will contrast quite a bit to Alex's story. I mean, it has similarities in that.
So was it your first or second?
Yeah, it has similarities in that, the occurrence of it was, I guess, somewhat traumatizing. But what always troubled me and made me feel like I was some sort of weird robot was that I felt nothing after. So,
it's okay. You're gonna make me cry. It's okay. It's okay.
Because this is hard.
I know it's hard. I know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's weird. I don't think I've actually ever gotten upset over it, but I think I had the miscarriage, and what was physically happening to my body, seeing the blood, and I expelled quite a lot of tissue and so on, that left me feeling a little bit it left me feeling unwell, and just having seen that, experienced that.
Yeah.
But once the pregnancy was obviously not going to go forward, and within hours, I just felt totally normal, like as though nothing had ever happened,
As though it was never there.
as though it was never there.
Yeah.
And I remember once I shared that I'd had this miscarriage, a lot of people showing concern, saying like, "Oh, how did you live that? Were you okay? Did you consult afterwards?"
Yeah.
And you hear so much of stories about other women who are much like Alex, very like deeply emotionally affected by the experience.
Yeah.
And
it was different.
I didn't relate to any of that.
Right.
Like I would, and it almost made me feel inadequate, or as though there was something emotionally stunted about me that I didn't feel that.
Right.
And this is a little bit of a pattern in. It repeats itself later on when I first had my first daughter.
Right.
But this feeling of what's wrong with me? Why am I not feeling the feelings that
you're supposed
like
to feel?
Non-emotionally stunted people would feel, or you would expect to feel.
Yeah.
And I just really carried on as being like, okay, the only thing I remember thinking, my doctor said, okay, well, obviously this pregnancy is not going to go forward. And she said, you're quite fertile after having a miscarriage.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Typically, I think, in the next few cycles afterwards, I don't know if that's like old wives stuff, old wives' tales, but she had told me, she said, you're quite fertile. So I was like, okay, then let's just try again. But never really kind of mourning or getting past that.
It was just an event that happened.
And I remember even Chris, my husband, just being really attentive and being very sort of like, are you sure? Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? As though I was, I was just hiding my true feelings about what had happened, or maybe I didn't want to release them. And I was just like, no, I'm fine. And I was, I think, genuinely fine.
And I think that could maybe have triggered it even more. People, your husband, it's normal asking you, are you fine? Are you fine? And keeps, making you question, like, I am fine, but maybe I shouldn't be fine, and
But I had never heard, and since I have never communicated, and I think that's why I feel so somewhat isolated or alone in this. I had communicated afterwards with many women who have gone through miscarriages and have felt the emotional roller coaster that comes with that, and the lows that come with that. And I've yet to meet someone who was like, no, like, I was okay. Yeah. And I always wondered, like, what kind of weird robot am I that I never felt anything afterwards? I don't know. I just like that's always kind of weirdly stayed with me. And I as I say, like, and we'll touch on this on another podcast, but these emotions in other
events,
in named traumatic moments have carried over, like in other circumstances of my life. And I can get into sort of the actual the way that I found out I was pregnant, and how the miscarriage occurred. I'm happy to talk about that, but I think for me the most what I keep in mind about having gone through that experience is that aloneness that I felt in feeling like there was something wrong with my emotions, the way that I reacted to that happening to me. So yeah,
Alex,
do you think, if we're being really kind to ourselves, and really kind to you in that moment,
I'll take the kindness.
Do you think that you are a person whose body's way of coping was to make you fine? Because you're having an emotion now.
Yeah, I know. It's
so something happened. Something within your body had feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
But in moments of trauma, seeing the blood is traumatic. Like, in moments of trauma, we all cope in so many different ways. I'm only learning this because of so much therapy.
So I was one of the first of my group of friends to try to have a baby, and so I didn't really have anyone that I could look to for answers or to talk to pregnancy about or try to have a baby with. So shortly after we got married, I was the one that pushed Chris and said, let's try to have a baby. And he was like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever.
Man.
And it happened quite quickly for us. And we were scheduled to go on a ski trip with friends. It was like a weekend away, and we'd done it every year for the past 10 years before then. And we looked forward to it. And obviously there was no reason not to go. I mean, I was early days in the pregnancy, and I was just going to not drink, but otherwise I could just carry on normally. I didn't see that there was any issue. And before we go, I go to the bathroom, and sure enough, there's a bit of spotting there. And I think, okay, I know
that's normal.
But I think at that point I didn't know that was normal because I didn't know
that
much.
was first.
And I was like, oh, it seems to me blood is not good in a situation like this. But I didn't think much of it. We drove up, and that evening we skied. We had a nice time. No, I didn't bleed that night. And in fact, I think I remember not really thinking much about the pregnancy, obviously, save for not drinking. And then the next day, we go skiing, and I'm on a green circle run, okay? Yeah. And I'm not a great skier, but, I can go down a green circle. Right. And I fall, and I have a concussion.
No.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I was not seeing that story go this
so
way.
And I don't know how the fall happened, but I was on nearly flat ground. So it wasn't skiing that made me fall.
It was.
Later I found out that I had you're gonna have to step in here, but a chute de pression.
A drop in pressure?
My
your blood pressure dropped.
My blood pressure went down, and then I got
dizzy,
dizzy, and I fell. And with the even though there was limited speed in when I was skiing,
impact.
I fell, and I crossed over my skis or whatever, and I hurt myself quite badly. My helmet was cracked, as were my goggles and so on. I mean, I didn't get up on my own. Paramedics came and got me up and so on. I don't remember much of that.
And at this point, are you thinking, shit,
my baby?
So I think,
pregnant.
So at that point, so the paramedics that are on site bring me down. My
Did
friends
you
are
say
there.
I'm pregnant?
And then he takes me aside, and he's like, he asked me some medical questions, and I'm like, I'm pregnant. He's like, okay, you should be okay. And I was like, okay. Fine.
We love first responders.
You should be okay. And then that evening, so obviously if he said you might have a concussion, he did some
and they did not send you to the hospital?
No, they didn't send me to the hospital. And I did a few basic tests, which led the paramedic to think that I probably was concussed. Sure enough, I later found out that I was concussed.
So that evening typically is sort of a big party evening for we're a group of 15 people in that big chalet.
You're back in the chalet after your concussion.
Chris, my husband, is like, do you want to just go home? You're not well. Or do you want to just go home tomorrow evening? Yeah. And I'm like, I'm just going to take it easy, but let's just go home tomorrow, the following day.
Right.
And then that evening I go to the bathroom, and then I pass a massive clot. And then I'm
can I ask you how big you would say though? Because I don't know what that looks like. Is it
show the camera?
It's big.
It's pretty big.
And it can be in pieces.
And I had then the cramps started, and I had massive cramps.
Do you feel it coming out when you pass the clot? Do you feel it?
Well, no, I don't think you feel it, because when you have your period, you pass some tissue. Okay. But I don't recall feeling it.
Okay. But you saw it in the toilet.
You couldn't miss it.
Okay.
You could not miss it.
Okay.
And I was bleeding far more heavily than you would expect of a period.
Okay.
So I didn't have much Alex, a lot of bleeding. It was that one gush of a lot of blood and tissue.
Yes. But you were spotting before you fell.
Yes.
And then you had a drop in blood pressure. I'm putting my little detective hat on. I do have a hat. You were probably already miscarried.
Well, so that's the whole thing that threw me
It's
for a
the mind
loop,
fuck.
right?
Yes.
Right, because then I started thinking I shouldn't have gone skiing.
Yes, the guilt.
I fell. I shouldn't have done that.
Guilt.
And then when I went to see my doctor said, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
You were already miscarrying
fell because
before.
you were miscarrying.
Yes, you were already miscarrying.
Yeah.
You bled before.
Yeah.
And so essentially, the fall had nothing to do with it. You fell because, as Anique said, you were miscarrying.
So when you saw the clot in the toilet, what was going through your head? Like what?
Well, then I knew. I mean,
but like what emotions? Like cry? Like what happened?
Just like
nothing. She was fine.
Yeah, like
at that moment you were fine.
Like physically, physically, my head.
So you're telling me you looked at the toilet and I'm not judging you in any way, shape, or form, but it was just like.
Yeah.
No,
really.
Well, like you're like I know. You're having a miscarriage. You know you're having a miscarriage.
Okay.
Logically.
You're like it's
logically.
My body is doing a thing.
Okay.
And your brain
it's done
and
its
your emotions, you haven't caught up yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like my body is doing a lot of things at this moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a splitting headache from concussed.
Right.
I've got cramps because I'm miscarrying.
Yeah.
And I'm bleeding.
Right.
Like, quite a lot.
Okay. So
I think my body is just processing the physicality of it, and mentally
not even there.
It's just on like it's neutral.
Okay.
I'm not feeling much in the way of emotions at all.
Okay.
One way or another, good, bad, what have you. I'm emotionally like blank.
Are you calling your husband?
Yeah, I was just going to ask that.
Are you sitting there by yourself?
So I excused myself from that party evening, and I just said like everyone knew I was concussed. So I just said I'm just going to go lie down.
But did everyone know you were pregnant?
No, they didn't. Yeah. No one knew. And so I lied down, and I spent the rest of that evening in bed, uncomfortable from cramps and so on. Mm-hmm. And I just told Chris, like, you need to get me pads now. And he went. And then, the next morning we went home and...
But you had told him what happened. You had told him that you miscarried.
Yeah, he knew.
Okay.
And quite honestly, except for the fact that I had to deal with the concussion, everything else I carried on as though it had never happened.
How long after your miscarriage did you start trying again to get pregnant?
I think the following month, I didn't try, but simply, if I remember well, because I was still living with the concussion.
Right.
And then I got pregnant the following cycle.
Wow.
Fast.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I got pregnant the following cycle, and always kind of expecting it to maybe go sideways until eventually I got that 12-week ultrasound. But it was only like a few years after, when one of my good friends had a miscarriage, and she lived that quite traumatically and was really had a hard time emotionally with it, that I told her that story about. I said, she was at that chalet weekend, and I said, do you remember that weekend?
Yeah.
I miscarried that weekend.
Okay.
And I said, there is hope after miscarriage. You can go on to have a healthy pregnancy, because she had never been pregnant. She had only lived a miscarriage and was concerned that was going to be her story.
Right.
Whereas you can have healthy pregnancies after miscarriage. And I think once you live that miscarriage, though, that is a concern that you have. Will I go on to carry a pregnancy to term?
Yeah.
Right? Will I be able to do that? Once my body had expelled what it needed to do, once I was physically able again, the only thing stopping me was the physical aspect of it. Then I was like, well, physically I can try again. Let's do that. And so I did, and I got pregnant quite soon after. And I remember seeing my doctor after the miscarriage, and the thing that stuck with me is she said, well, at least you can have children. Like, the miscarriage is a sign that you can have a child. Maybe my OB wasn't quite as good as yours. But so she's like, just carry on. Yeah. And I was like, that's what you did. Okay, I'll just carry on.
You did what you were told.
Yeah.
But let me ask you one thing, because and you can take like 10 seconds. I just want to like pinpoint something which I just found out. It's very interesting to me. You kept saying that, it was just upwards and onwards, and like as soon as you expelled it, it was like, let's go, no. And it was completely different for Alex, and you're one of my very good friends. I've known you for 20 years.
I mean, that's
more than
like,
that, maybe.
Yeah,
anyway,
probably like 30. Yeah.
And this is not something that you share, or I think you've ever shared. Like, I didn't know you had a miscarriage. Not that you had to tell me, but what I'm seeing is that although it was very, upwards and whatever, it's not something that you like to talk about.
No, it's not something that I like to talk about. Partly because inevitably, if you're going to share your miscarriage story, the follow-up question is, how did you feel? Okay. How did you get over that emotionally?
Okay.
And I never want to get into that.
Right.
Because
Why?
I feel deeply insecure about how I dealt with that. The fact that I didn't feel anything.
Yeah. Makes you feel what?
It's like, it goes back to what I said at the outset of this, which is this feeling that I was some sort of weird robot. Okay. Like that there was something emotionally stunted about me that I could not feel anything.
Can we reassure you right now that you are not a weird robot?
No.
And that the coping mechanisms that we develop as we grow up or whatever, it just is how your body works, and you carry it on because that's what we have been told by society for centuries to do.
Yeah.
And you've been doing it, we've been doing it, women have been carrying on through traumatic things forever. Like, you are literally programmed to do that.
But I never felt like I was suppressing anything. It's not like, oh, I'm probably suppressing something. No, I was like,
because you're not consciously doing, like, it's not a conscious thing.
Doing it,
right?
Because this is how you protect and stay safe, and we all do that in so many
different ways,
aspects of our lives, of motherhood, of parenthood, of right, like.
But
you're not a robot.
Yeah, like that rings true to me.
Yeah.
And I hope that I hope that for myself. That's.
But you are having a feeling.
Yes.
There are feelings in there about this.
Yes, you're not a robot.
Whether they came out or stayed in, this is something that happened to you.
I think if I were to identify that feeling, it's a feeling of guilt more than anything. Mm-hmm. That it's a feeling of guilt that I did not feel the emotion.
You did not perform as
a motherly.
Perform. Yeah. Your emotions as you might have thought you would have, as other people had expected you to,
exactly,
and all so on and so forth.
Yeah, and like I sound like a broken record now, but but that will carry through when I have my first daughter.
Yes,
like that.
We will get into that.
That emotional, like not feeling the things that you thought that you would feel or that you are expected to feel.
Yeah,
runs through other aspects. Yeah. So anyway.
Therefore, we now know about you.
Exactly.
Your coping mechanisms look like this.
Yeah.
When things are a lot, this is what Vanessa's body does.
Yeah.
I think for me, there is a really big lack of education around pregnancy and experiences and pregnancy loss. Mm-hmm. So when you go into a non-stress test, I don't know if you've ever done it, not upstairs.
Okay.
When they send you for a separate, there's a room.
Yeah.
So you walk into the room and there's a nurse sitting there and they say to you, they ask you a bunch of questions and then you go and you sit down and you do your non-stress test and there's like sheets dividing you. So you hear everything. And as you're walking in, the nurse says to you, what's your name, blah, blah, blah. How many pregnancies have you had?
Oh, yeah.
And then they say to you, and how many babies have you had?
Okay. Yeah. So they make a difference.
And every single, I did this 3 times for 6 weeks, right? And I sat there twice a week, and every single person that walked into that room had 1, 2, 3 miscarriages, pregnancy losses, whatever. And I would sit there in my first 2 pregnancies and think, whoa, like, I didn't happen to me. Like, I'm okay. And then when my third, after I'd had this pregnancy loss, I sat there and I thought, shit, everybody has had pregnancy loss. It's so rare. And as you talk to people, you talk to older people, like, even as I was going through this, my mom didn't tell me that she'd had a miscarriage.
Yeah, my mom too.
I'm like 3. Literally sitting here bleeding on the floor and she didn't tell me, you know, like, but my mother-in-law, like everybody, as you go through the process of child rearing and parenthood and whatever, people suffer these losses. But when we are taught about getting pregnant, when we are taught from like our doctors about getting pregnant, nobody is sitting, listen, you're going to get pregnant or you're going to struggle or you're going to go through fertility or whatever. There's so many different ways now to have children. But it is important to understand that part of this is there will be losses. And this is what it's going to look like. And this is what you should look out for. And here's how we're going to support you after. And blah, 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 blah. And because we don't have that knowledge, both of us had a miscarriage not at home. Right? Not in close proximity to our hospital or our doctor.
And that's true.
Like,
both of us
add that
have
onto it.
Super unprepared.
Didn't know what to look for. We're shocked by the amount of blood. Anyone ever tell you there's a clot that comes out? Like,
I'm a mother of 2, and I'm asking you. I don't know anything about miscarriages because it's not something I'm going to Google. You know?
So A, we don't talk about it because of all the stigma stuff, which we can talk about. B, you don't even know what to look for as you're going through it. You don't know what the steps. Do I go to the hospital? Do I not go to the hospital? We didn't know. And like even healthcare professionals, your first responder didn't send you to the hospital. So we don't have the knowledge. The people that are supposed to be taking care of us are not telling us. And because of this stigma, because there's this like, we don't talk about it.
Your friends.
Piece, our mothers aren't telling us that they dealt with it. Our aunts aren't telling us.
Though I didn't live that trauma that is so well known of women who miscarry, I later went on to have a second daughter and started spotting in my pregnancy. And then I was like, okay, well, this is happening again.
You're telling me this now?
So I was spotting and I was like, okay, well, I know what to expect now. This pregnancy is not going to go forward. And I never got to like full on bleeding. I went to the emergency. I had the foresight this time to go straight to the emergency room, and then they heard a heartbeat.
And you were.
And the pregnancy carried on as normal. So, the sight of blood is not equal miscarriage.
Totally. Yes.
But if you have had a miscarriage, that sight of blood can be incredibly triggering.
Yes.
I'm sure.
Because
and always kind of like in the back of your head.
Of course. So, but if you have experienced a miscarriage, and then you can go on to have a successful pregnancy with some amount of blood in the early days. Like you kind of have to take each pregnancy for what it is. And even though it's impossible to do that as a woman or as a human, really, live each experience as its own. And while experiences inform one another, be careful not to just assume the worst in situations like that. So I did go on to carry a successful, happy, healthy baby.
Yes, you did.
I did.
Thank you guys so much for sharing your stories with us. I know it wasn't easy, so I really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys on the next podcast.
Thank you for letting us tell our stories.
You've been listening to We've Probably Been There, a podcast by First Moms Club. You can follow First Moms Club on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and listen to us anywhere you get your podcasts. Join us next time for another story about this roller coaster ride we call motherhood. Thanks for listening.